Hello BookTube, I'm Mike and this is RiffRaff's Reading Renaissance. Today I'm pondering as to whether this video will be a response video or a tag or quite what it will be. There's a lot of talk on YouTube at the moment about the Read What You Own event, people introducing book buying bans, governments introducing book banning bans. And it's all making me wonder. Those of you who are very astute will notice that the pile of books behind me has morphed. And this is because while I was pondering, I was doing a bit of reorganizing, trying to return to some sense of order from the mounting chaos around me from the wall of books. This got me to thinking about, can one have too many books? What should one do if you think you have got too many books? And let's have a little think about both sides of that argument. Some famous leader said, to read too many books is harmful. Who was that? Oh, it was Mao Zedong. On the question of book buying, I think each to his own. Everybody needs to budget according to their means, live within their means, and not let book buying become a hardship in the way that any other addiction might become, like gambling, etc. Personally, the bulk of my book buying happens from second-hand charity shops, either attached to hospices or SPCA. And in fact, in the SPCA case, I rather like to think that in the same way as you go there to acquire rescue animals, which is a very good thing to do, one can also acquire rescue books, and I think that's quite a humane thing to do as well. Books themselves have exerted a profound influence on history, on culture, on civilization, and on science. And there are a lot of people who do not accept that you can have too many books. One such person is Umberto Eco, who said, books are like medicine. You don't wait until you've used up your existing supply before you go and replenish. You need to have a stock so that whatever the need is in the moment, you have the requisite resources there when the need arises. You have the right one to make you feel better, whether it's medicine or a book. I quite like that argument. But then Eco was big on books. He is known to have said that if God exists, then God is a library. The author of the book I was reading when you joined me is a Mexican author called Gabriel Zaid, and he wrote this wonderful book called So Many Books, which is basically a justification for owning many, many books. He does warn in this book that the reading of books is growing arithmetically. The writing of books is growing exponentially. If our passion for writing goes unchecked, in the near future, there will be more people writing books than reading them. I like to think this is an argument why those of us who do read books need not slow down. We need to keep going. He also said, the truly cultured are capable of owning thousands of unread books without losing their composure or their desire for more. I was looking in this little book called The Literary Wit and Wisdom, which has a whole lot of witticisms about reading. And one of the things I chose from here is a comment by Matt Hogan, who says, there are too many great books out there to read one that's not great. And I do think I agree with that. I think we need to be fussy in what we choose to read because there's so much good stuff and so little time, as Steve keeps reminding us. In his book, The Haunted Bookshop, Christopher Morley made the point that booksellers, and I'd like to argue booktubers, are missionaries who seek to sow good books on fertile minds and to propagate understanding and carefulness of life and beauty. I think that's a lovely way of putting it. Couldn't have put it better myself. In his book, An Experiment in Criticism, C.S. Lewis says, literature exists for the joy of the reader. I think that's very important too. One tends to get a little bit intellectual in some of these exercises and one argues about the merits and demerits of books, but ultimately it's about joy of the reader. In a more modern context, the one and only Drew Barrymore said, you can never have too many books. There it is, Word. And casting further back into history, Erasmus, the famous Rotterdam humanist, said, "When I get a little money, I buy books, and if there's any left, I buy clothes and food." Such dedication. Somerset Maugham said, "I would sooner read a timetable or a catalogue than nothing at all." And Rudyard Kipling said, "A man can never have too much red wine, too many books, or too much ammunition." Well, I suppose 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Samuel Johnson said, "A writer only begins a book. A reader finishes it." So it's up to us readers. And I thought about this while I pondered and while I sorted out my pile of books. And I came up with a tag. This is a monumental moment in the RiffRaff Reading Renaissance journey. This is the first original tag that I've created. So I'd like to introduce it to you. The rules are very simple. I thought what we should do is each choose 10 books, maybe 5 that we have already read and 5 that are still on our TBR, but 10 books that we came to through BookTube, and give credit to the individual booktuber who put us in touch with this book. It doesn't necessarily mean you must have never heard of the book before, but which was the booktuber that tipped you over and said, "I want to get that book. I have to read that book." That's the idea. And obviously, I thought it would be nice to link all their channels in the comments as per normal. So that's the tag I'm actually going to do today. You thought this was a response or a rant. It's turned into a tag. You never know what's going to happen on RiffRaff's Reading Renaissance, but here we go. So I'm going to select 10 books and consequently 10 booktubers who have moved me in a direction that has enriched me as a reader and introduced me to wonderful books. So first of all, thank you all very much. Secondly, the first 5 I have completed and read, and the next 5 they have arrived, but they have not yet been read. They're on the TBR. So without any further ado, my first choice is Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton. It's the only Edith Wharton book I've read so far, despite the fact that her other 2 famous books, Age of Innocence and The House of Mirth, are both much more famous and probably much better considered than this book. But I was made aware of this book by Shelley Swearingen on her channel, where she spoke about the dark undertone of the book and how the damaged characters were so brilliantly captured. And you don't have to know me and my channel for long to know that I love perfectly imperfect characters. So I was very excited by this. And of course, Wharton being Wharton comes with the reputation of being a simply superb wordsmith. I read the book and it's fantastic. It's dark. It's not for people who are looking for upliftment, but it's wonderful. So thank you, Shelley, for that recommendation. The second book I'm going to highlight, to give credit to a booktuber who brought me to a book, is the book called Bear by Marian Engel. This is, at surface level, an odd book because it's about a strange woman who has a strange relationship with a perhaps strange bear. It is also a Canadian award-winning book written by an author whose writing style and description of nature in the Canadian outback is simply superb. I came to this book courtesy of Greg at Another Bibliophile Reads. He was doing a series on odd books, and I couldn't resist. When I saw this, the premise was so strange, but he also said he'd read it and it was good. So I thought, let me read it. I ended up sneaking it into Garb August. I cheated a bit in Garb August. I don't think I read much rubbish at all, apart from the Rupert Patterson book. But the rest, I basically chose good but oddball books and sneaked them in under the radar for Garb August. And this was a splendid read. I defy anyone, if they get their head round the slightly weird premise about the woman and the bear, it's an exceptionally good writing experience and therefore reading experience. So thank you, Greg. The next book I came to was a book I was aware of but hadn't thought about pushing it up the TBR. And then I was watching the channel of Emily, Reads, a continuing education, and she was talking about books on her TBR, and she was talking about the concept of perhaps doing buddy reads. And funnily enough, when I watched her channel, I noticed on the bookshelf behind her, which is just a little bit more tidy than the one you see behind me, I recognized a book that I have on my shelves, and that is Homer's Iliad. And I thought, oh, that's fascinating. It's the same edition. I wonder if she's read it, because this is still on my TBR, as Steve will tell you. It's a big book, so it needs the right moment, but it will get read. I know it's a very, very important milestone in the canon. But having spotted it on Emily's bookshelf, I thought, let me check if she's read it. So I reached out in the comments and I said, have you read that? I see it's the same book. And she said, no, I haven't. Would you like to do a buddy read? And I was a little bit intimidated by the book, not by Emily, I hasten to add, but by the size of the book and where it was in our timing. I forget if we were in Garb August or Shorty September or where we were. And I thought, whoa, I need to find the right time to do this. So I said, perhaps we'll just think about it. And I felt quite bad because I was offered a chance to do a buddy read. And in this community, I think you shouldn't take that for granted. So then, in a subsequent video of Emily's, I saw her talking about wanting to read The Quiet American by Greene. So I immediately reached out and said, I also want to read that. And hey, look, it's a Shorty September type book. Would you like to do that? And she agreed, and we did, and we had an enormous amount of fun doing it. And in fact, if you haven't already seen it, there's a video of our buddy read and our report back, and a very fun chat we had that morphed not just about the book, but also into America's role in the world and how the world sees America's interventions, etc., etc. If you want to catch that, there it is up there. So thank you, Emily, for coinciding, although I knew about the book, for creating the opportunity in the BookTube community to get another great book read and to create a fantastic buddy read. What a nice experience. The next book I came across was one that was on my TBR, but it was one of those waiting patiently in the queue. And then I watched a video done by Aaron at Aaron Read a Book, or Aaron Read a Book, or Aaron Read a Book, or frankly, I can't keep up. But you know the guy I mean, and you know the channel. He reads two types of books, if I grossly oversimplify. Science fiction and fantasy, which is not quite my bag, but then he likes what he calls the little old lady books, which often is about Victorian literature, and those are fantastic, and his reviews of them are fantastic. And as I said, the first time I mentioned Aaron on my channel, listening to him is like chatting to a mate. It's really, really fun. And he said that he'd had tremendous fun reading Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. And I thought, well, if Aaron likes it, then I'm going to do it. And the next thing I knew, up came Victober, the celebration in October where we read Victorian literature. And I said, nope, I'm not reading Dickens, I'm reading Vanity Fair, because I've read some Dickens. Dickens will be there, there's Dickens December, but right now I'm going to do this. So it was due to Aaron's nudge that I ended up reading Vanity Fair, which has been a fantastic experience. And as you may know, one of my very recent videos has been my report back and rather deep dive into Vanity Fair. If you haven't seen it, you can catch it here. And so another experience where my interaction with BookTubers has led me to fantastic reading decisions and very, very enriching reading experiences. And the last one of the 5 that I've actually finished, I want to give credit to Mark at Book Time with Elvis, whose channel I always watch because he's such an interesting reader and such thoughtful feedback. And I happened to hear more than once on his channel that his favorite book was Jerome K. Jerome's 3 Men in a Boat, which has been one of those books on the list that I've always thought I should read and never got around to, simply because it's not a book that is overhyped or demands anything. It's just a sort of fun read type of book. So it was languishing in an overstocked TBR and not getting the love it deserved. But when Mark kept saying this was his favorite book, I thought, let me do it. And again, Shorty September was a splendid opportunity to pick a book of this size, which I've done. I'm actually about 10 pages away from the end, so technically not quite finished, but almost, and by the time you see this, I probably will be. So thank you, Mark, at Book Time with Elvis, for another splendid recommendation This is, imagine, it's pretty much exactly what you imagine. It's three jolly hockey sticks type of guys boating down the River Thames and the experiences that they have with a dog as well. There's always a dog. But it's a rollicking good read, and it is a nostalgic throwback to times gone past, and some splendid writing thrown in. So great fun all around and highly recommended. Okay, we're at the halfway mark. I'm going to pause for a coffee. And we're back for the second half, which are 5 more books equally brought to me by YouTubers, but these I have not yet read, so I won't be able to give you more than the external blurb type of take on them. The first channel that brought a book to my direct attention was Ollie at Criminology. And as you know, he reads books, crime and that sort of thing, or whatever the byline is. And I have to be honest, the vast majority of the books that Ollie focuses on are not really my immediate cup of tea or priority, given how much I've got to read. But this book he chatted about intrigued me greatly. The book is called The Glamour, and it's by Christopher Priest. And Ollie's summary of it, or his review of it, said it was one of the strangest books he'd read. The premise, I wonder if I can read it to you and see what they say. The glamour is the unsuspecting underworld to our normal lives, seductive and sinister, peopled by those who can never be seen. It exists on the edge of reality, full of doubt, behind a veil of invisibility. It's the story of 2 young people who fall in love while trying to escape from the glamour. The way Ollie described it, which isn't exactly what I'm reading on the back of the book, was he talked about a guy who was in some sort of accident and was suffering amnesia. And as he tried to regain his memory and rediscover his life, he started wondering whether everything people were telling him was in fact true. But the more Ollie talked about this book, the more I got hooked in, and I thought, this sounds very interesting. And if a guy like Ollie is saying this is worth the read, I'm going to take a chance. So here it is. It's sitting in my TBR. Thank you, Ollie. And I will report back on it once I've had a chance to read it and see if it's as good as it's cracked up to be. The next book came to me via Brian at Bookish, which is a lovely channel, very thoughtful and occasionally very brave in the things he speaks out about in these difficult times, which isn't always easy for all of us. But this book he particularly cited as being very good and very underloved. So I thought, well, okay, let me take the cue. Let me step up as a good reader and see if I can give this book love, because I do respect Brian's reading taste. And if he says it's that good, let's try it out. The book is Nightwood by Djuna Barnes. If I turn to the back cover, it says, a novel of extraordinary and appalling force, a kind of symbol of sinister magnificence. One of the greatest books of the 20th century. That's a comment from William S. Burroughs. Nightwood, Barnes' strange and sinuous tour de force, has become a classic of modernist and lesbian literature since its first publication in 1936. Set in Paris, Berlin, and Vienna during the decadent period between the 2 world wars, it is the story of Robin Vote and those she destroys. Her husband, the Baron, their child Guido, and the 2 women, Nora and Jenny, who love her. The whole is illuminated by the fantastic monologues of the renegade Dr. Matthew O'Connor, and on and on. It does sound interesting, but what I remember Brian saying was it was the quality of the writing that particularly struck him. And again, that's my sweet spot. I don't really mind what the story's about. I don't even mind if it's a little bit like science fiction. It's about the writing and therefore my reading experience. I want to be stunned. I want to be stopped in my tracks. I want to be made to sit and think, wow, 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 wow. That's what I'm looking for. So into the TBR pile it goes. Quite near the top, all of these, because they are personally recommended by booktubers who I respect. So moving on. Another channel that we all love is Gareth at Books, Songs and Other Magic. He's got a wonderful channel. It's got a wider berth than some of the book channels I've seen, where we get music. And of course, being a musician myself, I love watching him and his son playing music on his channel, but I also like the mindfulness Gareth brings to everything he does, whether it's books or his top 100 albums, whatever. And he mentioned that his favorite author of all time was Ray Bradbury. Now, if you're very alert and you've watched my video about the 10 books that have been on my shelf for a year and haven't been read, and if not, guess what? There it is. In that book, in that video, I admitted to not yet having read Fahrenheit 451. And Gareth said not only is Ray Bradbury his favorite author, but this is one of his favorite books. Now, of course, in today's age, with the threat of books bans and the good stuff that MJ is doing on her channel, all about protecting readers from the threats to books, I thought it is simply not acceptable not to have read this book. So this book is going right at the top of the TBR. You know, I'm nearly finished 3 Men in a Boat. I've really got to read this thing. I know a little bit about it because it's such an iconic book that people have talked about it. But often the difference between what you hear about a book, think of Dracula or Frankenstein, and what you actually read and the experience you have when you read it can be vast. So I want to read this, and I want to read it very soon. So thank you, Gareth, for that excellent recommendation. And book number 9 is one that I picked up. I did not know about this book at all. I heard about it from Angelina on her channel, Books Do Things to Me. And the book she's recommending is Kazuo Ishiguro's Nocturnes. And the reason she said she thought people like me might like this book is that it's about stories of music and nightfall. And that was very intriguing. I haven't read any Kazuo Ishiguro. Obviously, I need to, and no doubt people will tell me I should start with The Remains of the Day, which I did see the film many years ago. But I think I'm going to start here for 2 reasons. One is I'm very intrigued by the short stories about music idea. That's extremely attractive. And secondly, I've been watching Angelina's channel since she started, and it's never dull. The books she reads are always interesting. The stories she tells from her lived experience are always interesting. So, thank you, Angelina. I'm going to put this in my TBR list. So, that's 9 books. We've got 1 to go. But what is it I hear you all thinking and saying, but not saying? Where's the book from Steve? We've had 9 books and we haven't had one from Steve yet. Is that possible? Well, there's 2 answers to that question. The one is I think I might need to do a separate video on the books I've been influenced by from Steve, because it's, of course, it's so vast. But in reality, number 10 is Steve, but it's a different book. Steve talks endlessly about the great books, and we all love it, and we could listen endlessly to the many, many, many books that he's read and the ones he likes to recommend. I do differ from him sometimes in the ones he does not like, but I will give him credit. Of late, I'm hearing Steve talking about reconsidering and rereading, and there are some instances, now I'll let him tell you about them rather than me, where I think he might be changing his mind. Anyway, one thing everybody knows about Steve is that he absolutely adores Anthony Trollope. And I have to say, I was underinformed about Trollope. I knew about Dickens. I even knew about Thackeray and Vanity Fair, but I really didn't know much about Trollope at all. And Steve is probably Trollope's number 1 fanboy, if I'm honest, and rightly so. And he has sung the praises of Trollope. He's done readings from Trollope. You can't watch Steve and not know how high he rates Anthony Trollope as a novelist. So that got me into the point of saying, well, I'll watch out at the charity shops. And I did. And sure enough, I started acquiring one by one the various books in the Barchester Chronicles series and a couple of others that I found along the way. But then because of my understanding of Trollope, and because Trollope was now on my radar, and I went to look at these bookshops, I made a very strange discovery. I found a book in 2 volumes called Anthony Trollope, South Africa, Volume 1 and Volume 2. These were sitting in a charity shop, and I thought, what on earth is this? And I thought, look, it's a charity shop, the books are next to nothing, but I bought them. And I immediately, when I got home, I emailed Steve to say, guess what I found? And he shared my joy. He was surprised to see them. They seem to be scarce, not collector scarce, but scarce as in you don't see them in the wild very often, as he would say. But it turns out that in 1878, Trollope was actually stationed for a visit in South Africa. And he spent some time here and wrote of his travels, as he did in many of the places he went. His day job involved traveling around representing the government, and it took him to many places around the world. And I had not been aware of this at all, but there's a whole non-fiction side to Trollope where he writes travel books. And these are the 2 volumes of his books on South Africa in the 1800s. He covers all aspects of the politics and social issues of the time, of race and colonialization and governance, education, tensions between the various groups. And I'm led to believe it's a very, very interesting read. And certainly it will be a fascinating snapshot for someone living in South Africa of today to have our roving reporter, Mr. Trollope, report on what it was like in 1878 when the book was published. So, thank you, Steve, via a slightly obscure path of making me alerted to Anthony Trollope, so I was looking out for him and therefore found these books, which I was not looking for, but which will take pride of place in the TBR, and I will read them under my non-fiction section with great interest because of the local content, which was a great surprise to me in the first place. So, a range of books across all genres, across all spectrums, many of whom I would never have even been aware of if it wasn't for BookTube and for you guys on BookTube and your channels telling me to read more, not to have a book ban, not to have a buying ban, not only to read what you already own. I know that's an issue and I understand, and please, there's no lecture here. Everybody do what's right for you. But I'm just putting in a little plea for those of us who are still on a journey of discovery and finding wonderful, fantastic books that need to become part of this canon that Umberto Eco says we can have, even if it's more than we're going to get a time to read in the foreseeable future. Perhaps I'll give the last word to Virginia Woolf. She said, fiction is like a spider's web, attached ever so lightly perhaps, but still attached to life at all 4 corners. And picking up on that concept, if I pick up one of my reference books, The New Lifetime Reading Plan, in that they make the statement, the books here discussed may take you 50 years to finish. The point is that they are intended to occupy an important part of a whole life. Many happen to be entertaining, but it is not the entertainment that is why they are most profitably read. What they offer is of larger dimensions. It is rather like what is offered by loving and marrying, rearing children, carving out a career, creating a home. They can be a major experience, a source of continuous internal growth, hence lifetime. I'm a big fan of lifetime learning. I'm obviously a big fan of lifetime reading. So let's defend our right to read very gently when it's up against those who want to do book bans, be my guest, and much more vigorously when it's up against people or organizations or governments who want to tell us what we can and cannot read. As a South African who lived through severe government censorship in the apartheid era, and I'm hoping to make a video on this, but I'm still doing a little bit more research before I get there, I feel extremely passionately about our right to read. No one should tell you or me what we're entitled to read. As my father used to say to me, don't outsource your thinking, it's your job. So, BookTube, thank you for coming with me on this rather strange ramble that started out as a bit of a response video and morphed into a tag. And if any of you find it an interesting thought to chat about 5 books you've read and 5 books you're going to read from BookTubers, the idea would be different BookTubers. As you'll see, there's no duplication in my selections. That's the tag. Have a go if you like. If you don't, read on. So thank you very much for accompanying me on this episode. If you liked what you saw, please like and subscribe. It does make a huge difference. And in any event, I hope to see you very soon in the next one. So thank you, BookTube. Bye-bye for now. Bye.